Okay. All right. Well, welcome to the Becoming High Quality Multi-Year Grant. This particular meeting focuses on the request for grant application that was released recently for the Becoming High Quality Grant. This meeting, as you can see, is quite long. We are going to be recording and we will have some time for questions. We tend to keep we will have questions at the end where people can unmute themselves. If there are some, we will be answering questions as well in the chat. If there are some questions that some of the moderators are not able to answer, they may stop the presentation to be able to ask the question that might have relation to what we're talking about. So just know that we will work on getting your questions answered, whether it's via chat or in person. And then there's always the Q&A and that you can ask questions on, as well as the, if you wanted to email schoolreadiness@utah.gov. So again, this meeting will be recorded. We will upload this final recording to the DWS grants page shortly after the meeting. So the grants page that you were able to pull the application and supporting documentation from. After this meeting, we will upload the recording to that grants page. If you would like to ask a question in person, if you feel like it's a bit too long to answer in chat, then please raise your hand and we'll try to make some time for your questions. Again, we have a lot of detail that we need to go through. So we just want to make sure that we're going through that entire RFGA for you so that we can break that down and answer any questions that you might have. And then just to let you know that we do have moderators that are taking note of those questions, and we will be uploading those Q&A questions, so the questions and answers to the Q&A document. So you'll have access to all the questions and answers from today's meeting. So just as an introduction, my name is Emma Monch. I work at the Department of Workforce Services, Office of Childcare. I've been overseeing this grant for 5.5 years, and it's been great to be able to work on this initiative and to see how it's evolved, and also to be able to serve students and to be able to provide support to grantees, as you know, directors, teachers, coaches. In this grant, we do offer coaching, so we'll get more into that. But it's just a great initiative that we've been able to kind of provide and offer support for those that are able to be approved and accepted onto the grant. So I'm going to pass my time over to Kimber so she can introduce herself, and we'll go through the different departments.
Thanks, Emma, and welcome everybody. It's good to see some faces. I am a little bit of a newer face in the early childhood portion of Office of Child Care. I actually am one of the contract analysts that works for Department of Workforce Services in the administrative division. And so I will be one of the analysts helping with this grant. And it's exciting to get to see you all and hopefully be able to work with you. Let's go to Chelsea.
Hi, everyone.
Well, actually, sorry, Kimber, I was going to have everyone from DWS. So I was going to have Joe go next, and then Keisha, and then we'll go on to USBE.
Emma, will you switch the slides so that it shows the order?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you. Joe Edmond. I work in finance with DWS and specifically work with Keisha Calloway, who's managing CCDF grants. She's in another meeting right now, and she will join us shortly.
I'm Jessica Mackley. I'm a preschool specialist at USBE. I've been with the agency for 4 years, and I help oversee the expanded student access grant, but I'm here to support on Becoming High Quality however I can.
And I am Jared Lisenby. I'm also a preschool specialist at the Utah State Board of Education. I've been there 1.5 years now. Like Jessica, I primarily work with the expanded student access grantees, but I'm also here to support on the Becoming High Quality.
And I'm Chelsea Oakes, also from USBE as a preschool specialist. And I am the specialist over the Becoming High Quality. And then I support the Expanded Student Access Grant as well. And I've been here almost a full year.
Hi, I'm Samantha Mafua from the Children's Center Utah, and I am the lead school readiness mentor coach. I coach coaches who coach your teachers, and I mainly work with the Expanded Student Access coaches, but I also support Becoming High Quality.
And then I'm Paul Mueller. Also do what Samantha said she does, which is coach the coaches on these grants. But I mostly work with the Becoming High Quality grant coaches. So I mostly work with this grant. So excited to see you guys here, and welcome.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for the reminder, Chelsea. I was switching the slides on my end, but not on this end. So I will try to do that work so everybody can see. All right, so just as an update, the contract period, this is a multi-year grant. In past years, we've only done a 1-year grant. That has been quite tolling on grantees to be able to apply and fill out that application every single year. So we've listened to that feedback and we have adjusted this to a multi-year grant. We just need to obviously add that grant funds are not always, may not always be available, but we do intend to be able to have these 3-year grants. And so I just wanted to add on here that, and I am going to pull this, excuse me, I am going to move this back because we didn't catch this, but this Becoming High Quality grant is actually a 3-year contract. So I will change that later. But this talks about the 2 years and 3-year grant. Oh, I guess we had this on here. Sorry. For those of you that have been on the grant for a year, it will only be 2 years. So because it's a 3-year grant, those of you that are current grantees and have been on for a year, which right now all of our grantees have only been on for a year, you will have 2 years. So when you apply, you'll have that extension of 2 years. And then those that are new to the grant, you would have a 3-year contract. That is a contract that you're not stuck in for 3 years. If you feel like you want to transition over to expansion, you can do that. You can apply for expansion, but just know that that contract would be for 3 years. And then the application deadline. So it is going to be Tuesday, April 12th, and it's due by 5 p.m. And I really want to emphasize, and I think we all as program specialists and coaches want to emphasize that this is a hard deadline. So if your application comes in at 5:01, or you submit your application and you have supporting documentation and miss one of those supporting documentations, we're not going to be able to accept anything after 5:01. That might seem harsh, but it is a competitive grant and we need to be able to have a fair and equal process for every grantee and every applicant. So, one of the specialists mentioned, and I think this is a great idea, is that you put this in your calendar for April 10th. And even put it in your calendar earlier. You have just under a month to be able to apply, but maybe put it in a little bit earlier than April 10th. This way, if you submit your application and some supporting documents, myself and Kimber can go through what has been submitted. And if anything is missing, we can reach out to you and tell you that we have missing documents. If you submit your application on the same day as April 12th, Kimber and I are so incredibly busy during that time, pulling in applications, getting things ready for the scorers orientation meeting and prep meeting. that we will not be able to give you any type of, we will not be able to communicate that things are missing. We have a tracking form on our end to let us ourselves know what has been submitted and what is missing. So if you can send that in earlier, we can, you know, assist you by helping you to understand that we're missing some things, and you can submit those things before the deadline. So take note of this date and maybe make it a few days earlier so that you can get that in on time. And believe me, it happens every year where we get an applicant that is on the dot of 5 o'clock and they're not able to get everything in. And they're just a little bit late, or they submit it on the day and we're not able to give them that additional information. So just be aware of that deadline. It's so much work for you to do, and to not be able to get things in on time. We don't want you to put all of that energy and effort in and not be able to and not get the grant, you know, and not be able to get in at least into the scoring committee. I mean, it would still be, we would score what we had, but if it doesn't have all of the elements, you would lose so many points that you probably wouldn't be able to make it through. So just be aware of that. We also have a Q&A, as I mentioned earlier. This is a Google app where you can go in and write your questions, and those questions will be sent to Kimber and me, and we will be able to look through the question and then add it to the Q&A page. That closes on Tuesday, April 6th. So 6 days before the application deadline. So always be asking those questions via the Q&A page, and also through the school readiness email if you'd like to. And then check out that Q&A page constantly, because even though you may have had your question answered, some other people may be able to be asking questions that you maybe didn't think of, and it may help you out with the application. Okay. Any questions about that phase? And you can find the link to the RFGA here. Since you're here, I assume that you have that link. You have that link. So, okay, I'm going to just review the purpose of the Becoming High Quality grant. This particular grant provides resources to existing early childhood education programs administered by local education agencies, charter schools, and private childcare providers, and home-based educational technology programs to develop high-quality environments that support a child's development of cognitive, physical, language, and social and emotional skills. High-quality preschool programs have been shown to be effective in preparing young children for kindergarten. This grant program aims to increase high-quality education capacity in the state and collect student outcome data. So as we go through those elements of high quality, you'll see how we work closely with the grantees over the next 3 years to be able to build that quality within their program. And then just some backgrounds. We've got the, in terms of the School Readiness Initiative, this grant has been running since 2014. I believe that, yeah, so it then, it originated from a from a HB 96 bill. And then in 2019, it transitioned into a compilation of a Senate bill, which really combined both the Becoming High Quality grant and the Expanded Student Access grant. And this was to ensure a smooth pipeline from becoming to expansion. We do have those amendments, those 2019 amendments, Senate bill amendments. So if you want to learn a little, more about these two grants, you can click on the link that's provided under the second bullet point. There's a second, within that second bullet point, there's another link, which are the 2022 amendments, and you can find those amendments in this link. And those amendments really cover a couple of different changes. So we will explain those in the teacher credentials and the eligibility form a little bit later. And then the initiative aims to increase school readiness, improve academic performance, and increase quality of preschool programs. Okay. It also, in terms of program services, we support eligible providers of early childhood education programs to develop the structures and processes to implement the elements of high quality in early childhood education programs. We also serve those eligible students, and those need to meet that criteria of being 3 or 4 years old by September 2nd, 2022, who are, number one, either economically disadvantaged with at least one risk factor, and we'll walk through that that eligibility form later, like I mentioned, or they need to be an English learner, or they can be a child who is in foster care. And then programs are encouraged to serve students with disabilities in an inclusive environment. Looks like Kimber sent a link. Thank you, Kimber. Okay, so here is the eligibility form. I'm going to just pull this up here. It may be small on your screen, but I believe that you all have a version from the DWS grants page. This is what the eligibility form looks like. There is a little bit, there's a section beneath this that goes over the eligibility criteria that the parent or guardian would complete. But this is just a sample of what we ask for so that you can use this in your office or your preschool to determine whether the child is eligible. So you get to determine whether they are or if they're not. And then you would apply, mark all that apply. And what we want to know is the student eligible for kindergarten? Are they, if they are, then they would not qualify. If they're not eligible, then you move on to the next section. Is the student an English learner? No. Then you can still go on to the next one. Yes, then that automatically makes them eligible. Is the student currently in foster care? Yes, that automatically makes them an eligible student. No, then they would need to either qualify as an English learner or a economically disadvantaged student with one risk factor. And that's where we have here is the student eligible for free or reduced lunch? And that is defined as economically disadvantaged. So they have to have one of these two, of these three, and then the economically disadvantaged, they have to have one of these risk factors that are listed here. Any questions about eligibility?
Emma, I would just add that we want you to complete the entire form regardless of how they qualify, because we are wanting to know if they qualify under multiple categories. So you can kind of reference that office use box to see how, like, they have to check one of those boxes under the mark all that apply in order to be considered eligible. But we also want to know if they qualify for more than that.
Yeah, thank you. We also will have this form in Spanish. And then I also wanted to just remind you that, or let you know that this form can potentially feel intimidating for some parents or guardians, just because there's a lot of detailed information in here. You know, we're asking information about the lives of our students and their families. And for some parents, I've had a couple of parents calling and asking if we're from DCFS and if we're going to be coming to the house. And just please have somebody that understands this form to be able to share this with the guardians or the parents, to be able to help them to understand that this is information that you keep internally. This information is never sent to me, to USBE, to anyone at Department of Workforce Services or the Children's Center. This always stays in-house, and you lock this up, and we will do monitoring once, you know, if you're on the grant, we will monitor this and make sure that these documents are locked in a safe environment, right, within the program. So, and also remind your families that they do not need to check these off. They don't need to tell us which risk factors they have. At the bottom, we will ask if they have 0 to 3, 3 to 5, and so on. So really, they would just give you a range of how many they meet. So they don't need to check off and tell you exactly what's happening within that child's environment. Okay, and now I'm going to transition the next slide over to Chelsea.
Hey, Emma, there was a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to answer it now or just have someone answer it in the chat.
Yeah, let's take a look. Is this form to be completed by each family of a preschooler if we are in the grant? Yes. So this, great question, Paul. So this form is the form that will help you to be able to identify if your students are eligible students. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, but grantees on this grant have to have at least 25% of their students need to be eligible students. And so this is the form that you would use with the family member to complete, to be able to determine if you know how many students you have that are eligible. It's also a form that would help you to prioritize enrollment in your school to ensure that you're enrolling students with the highest risk factors, because the students with the highest risk factors are the ones that are at most risk and are statistically less likely to be able to be successful within academia. It doesn't mean to say that they won't be, but they, you know, the more risk factors you have, that the higher the chances of being, you know, less successful are common with these higher risk factors. So yes, they have to be completed, and then again, so this doesn't have the whole form, but underneath this section, there is a range of how many they meet under this criteria. And then once you review that form, you would check off, okay, this child is an English learner as well as economically disadvantaged. Is the child eligible? Yes, definitely, because they're meeting 2 of these criterias, right? If you've got a child that comes in with all these elements of quality, or even, you know, maybe they're missing a couple of them, but they have a majority of these, they're at the highest risk. And so you would want to prioritize them in your classrooms. And I know that's hard to do when you have, you know, potentially a first come, first serve basis, but being able to find them and put them into a classroom and get them into your program is, you know, obviously what's best. So.
And a lot of programs just kind of add this paper to their registration packet for families, and it doesn't take a ton of time for them to fill out. Thankfully, we try to keep it as simple as possible. All right, Emma, will you go to the next slide, please?
Absolutely.
All right, so there are some requirements to in order to apply for this grant. So we just want to make sure that you are aware of them. So you must have an existing preschool program, and you must be one of the following. So an LEA that uses federal or state education funding are eligible, a charter school that uses federal funding. If you have a program that uses state funding for your charter school, we recently, like in the last little while, found out that that's not an appropriate use of funds. And so you'll need to talk to your finance department and kind of figure out other ways of funding your charter school preschool program. I don't think there were a lot that were doing that, but just in case you weren't aware. You also can be a private childcare provider, a provider offering home-based educational technology program, or a charter school that does not use federal or state education funding and that has like a private or third-party provider on its campus. And then you also must meet that 25% eligible students, which Emma had mentioned earlier, and then register and maintain that minimum enrollment throughout the grant period, and then have a plan to prioritize enrollment for students. So if students are already in and you get students that are eligible, you wouldn't kick kids who are already in your program out, but if you had a space become available, you would prioritize eligible students. Let's see, Summit, can I repeat the part? Charters do qualify. You just are not supposed to use state funding for your charter school. That's against the charter rules and guidelines. I can't remember the words, bylaws. It's K through 12, not preschool. So if you're using state education funding for your charter school, you just kind of need to reassess what you can do. We've had some programs that have decided to have their preschool program become a private provider, just because we don't have a funding mechanism in place right now from state education funding, if that makes sense. It's kind of one of those where we didn't have an official rule, and so we were like, we're not going to penalize anyone for doing that, but try in the future not to do that because you could get in trouble. So that's kind of what that was, just a fun thing that we found out last year. And then you must also currently exhibit some elements of a high quality preschool program. So becoming high quality is really about building all of those elements of quality. So we don't expect you to have them all right now, but we do want you to have some elements, and you'll be graded or scored on the grant application based on what quality elements you do already have. Any questions?
Chelsea, I'm just going to jump in real fast. You said something that made me remember something. Just as Chelsea was saying that with enrollment, you don't prioritize or kick kids out. Once families have completed this eligibility form, it is good for the entire school year. So if a child is in foster care and then gets adopted, if when they completed the form, they were in foster care, that is good for the entire school year. So don't worry about having to follow up with families and having them submit the eligibility form. You just need to have them complete it once.
Yes, that's a good clarification, because that would be a lot of work to have to follow up with people. All right, we can go to the next slide. Programs that are not eligible to participate, if you're receiving expanded student access grant funds, you are not eligible because those are the same streaming or fund stream. You also cannot be receiving the result-based contract grant funds during the same fiscal years. If you receive funding through the Child Care Quality System Intensive Coaching Grant, you are not eligible. And if you have been evaluated and awarded a high quality or high quality plus rating in CCQS, you're not eligible. However, you can be on Becoming, and then if you decide you want to pursue the high quality or high quality plus rating, you could do that while on the grant. And then if you receive that rating, you would just terminate your contract with Becoming. We had some programs do that this last year. And then if you have received 3 years of funding through this grant, you are no longer eligible. And because the hope is that after 3 years, you are ready to move on to expanded student access or those high quality or high quality plus ratings. And you can also see more about the expanded student or the result-based contracts on those links in code. And then one of the components for what you will do when you are on the grant, if you are on the grant, we have the school readiness assessments. The board has approved the preschool entry and exit profile, which is similar to the KEEP, which is required for all kindergarten students. And so this is our preschool version. So you would use this and administer the PEEP assessment to all of your students who are 4 years old before September 2nd, which is the cutoff for the grades. So all those who would be a year before kindergarten essentially would receive the PEEP assessment at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. And then the USBE will provide access to training so that you know how to administer that test. We'll also be the ones that collect the data and analyze the results and then report to the board as well. And then you will, in addition to the PEEP, you will also be doing a pre, mid, and post assessment that is aligned with early childhood learning standards. And this is a requirement because it is just really good practice for high quality programs to have these pre, mid, and post assessments because they provide that critical information about student development and growth. They allow teachers to individualize and differentiate instruction and lesson plans. You can also use that data to guide your professional development, your coaching, and family engagement. And then we do ask that you submit those assessment data as part of our quarterly reporting. And then I am going to let Paul take over.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chelsea. So now we get to the best part, coaching. So on this grant, all the programs are required to have coaching for their program. I would be kind of working with those coaches to help develop elements of high quality and ECHRS goals. And that coach would be visiting the grant classroom like weekly, giving feedback to the teachers, meeting with the teachers and helping them improve their practices. So through this process, the teachers are learning and growing and implementing these new practices. And then they're kind of coming back to me with their data to make sure that they're meeting all of the coaching requirements, and just so that we can kind of monitor and see how everything is going in the program. Yeah, I think that's kind of it for this slide. I didn't go over all of those aspects, but that's kind of the overview of coaching, and it's super exciting. So, so like I said, they'll be working with me. The coach in the program will be working with me to meet monthly with me so that I can make sure that they are, getting support that they need for their coaching, as well as meeting the needs of their teachers and kind of meeting the goals of their teachers as well. And then we also meet monthly doing one-on-one PLCs, which is professional learning communities. So this is where all of the becoming high quality coaches meet. And it's a really good time for us to kind of dive into some material about what coaching is and how to set that up successfully in your program, as well as elements of high quality and what those are and how you can implement those in your program as well. And those are just a 2-hour meeting each month. It's also a good time to, kind of network and get to know other programs, other coaches, and kind of problem solve with other coaches. Okay, and so in addition to the coaching that is required on this grant, a big element component of this grant is the professional development that is expected to be occurring within your program. So this is a little bit different from just normal staff meetings where you're going over roles and responsibilities, things like that. We kind of want to see professional development that focuses a little bit more on teaching and learning, and implementing some practices that are being helping your teachers improving their teaching, basically. And then we also help to monitor this and make sure that this is happening, and giving you some resources to be able to have professional development for your teachers, whether that's at USBE or other CDA opportunities, things like that. Okay, and then another big component of the grant is family engagement. So, in order to make sure that you're having a program that's high quality, the partnership with the families is super important, especially, starting in preschool. So we want to make sure that you're kind of set up for some family engagement opportunities, and identifying some gaps and goals to be able to increase the partnership with the families. And again, we kind of meet with you monthly to be able to assist with this, and to be able to, give you some additional resources, and just kind of check in with you to make sure that you're meeting those guidelines. And then I think I'm going to pass it back to Emma. Oh, you're on mute, Emma.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Chelsea. Okay, so I'm going to review some of the grant components. One of those components is the Early Childhood Environmental Rating Scale, so ECHRS 3. So this is a tool that we use with becoming high quality grantees, and we use this tool mainly for, I would say in this particular grant, as coaching purposes. So we provide, this particular tool focuses on a lot of different environments, a lot of environmental aspects within the classroom, as well as the health and safety and the interactions of the students. And so we come in and we do a beginning of year and end of year observation. And we're hoping that at the end of year is increasing from the beginning of the year, and we're providing support and trainings around this tool. So actually Samantha currently over the past 2 years has provided ECHAS 3 trainings. They're monthly trainings, and they are required for becoming high quality grantees. And but it's a tool where you can come in and learn about have the training and ask questions, and to be able to apply that training and set goals within your program. So just as an overview, the ECHAS 3 is a widely used comprehensive assessment tool measuring both environmental provisions and teacher-child interactions. Again, it will be used to evaluate a baseline and set goals for grantees. The board approved to use the ECHAS 3 to determine and verify high quality preschool programs. This tool is actually used as a portion of quality. So we do look at other things, and you'll be able to see within code that there are many other elements of high quality. And so we're using this along with those elements of high quality to help you to set goals and to recognize where your gaps are, and to be able to move forward and to build that quality over the next 3 years. The board determines the thresholds for high quality using the tool. So we don't have a set, we have a minimum threshold that is, enforced within the ECHAS, expanded student access grant. But for this grant, excuse me, we know that there are going to be some gaps, and that we're going to be working on that measurement and that threshold. So we will be helping you to build that, and hopefully we see as the years goes by that you're building on that score, and coming to those meetings, asking questions, and bringing those answers and setting those goals and bringing them back to the classrooms. And then program specialists as well as coaches will work with grantees to set goals, to improve areas, to determine to work for quality. So this then kind of transitions us into those elements of high quality and that gap analysis. In your application, you will provide a gap analysis based on the elements of quality that are listed within that analysis. And you'll be able to identify the differences between the current state and desired level of quality. So where you are now and where you would like to be year 1, and where you would like to be year 2 and year 3, so that you can smoothly transition into expansion if that's what you would like to do. It's also a mechanism to set well-defined goals and create timelines to close gaps. And so some questions that you can be asking yourself as you complete this gap analysis within the application is obviously number 1 is like, you make it about your program. It's okay to have gaps on this grant. So don't be afraid don't think that you're not going to be accepted on if you have gaps. It's completely okay. You have to have some elements, because it is hard to transition a program that has none of these elements of high quality to bring them to a level of quality within 3 years. And it makes it a lot easier if you have genuine goals for your classrooms as well as your overall program. And so it's okay to share those goals. It's okay. There's always room for improvement. So if you feel like you're doing something to a high level, explain that, but demonstrate how you would like to improve on that, on those things as well. I wouldn't be putting NA, not applicable, in some of these areas. So just be aware of what you're doing well and set goals on how you can become better, because we can always be improving, right? But if there are, gaps within your program. So let's say, for example, you don't have a kindergarten transition plan in place, or you're not doing as much as you would like to in family engagement. Maybe you don't have a coach. Talk about those things. Tell us. We won't be scoring your applications. We have a scorers committee that we've pulled together, but we we also, it helps us to know as program specialists, as Chelsea and I and Paul and Samantha work with you, we know what your gaps are, and we know how to work with you and to be able to provide the support that you need. So think about the questions: where are we now? Where is, what do we, you know, where is high quality? How is that defined within the bill? And how do we fit into that? And then how are we going to close those gaps over the next year? So you can have a short-term plan, and then it'd be nice to have a long-term plan. So over the next 3 years, and then that can be broken down into yearly plans, and then those yearly plans could potentially be broken down into monthly plans. We don't have to do all that detail for this application, but you know where your gaps are. So please provide that information and tell us where you would like to go with those elements of quality. And then collaborate with program specialists. You would do that with us, and we would determine ongoing gaps and progression towards the goals once you're on the grant. Any questions about grant components and or the ECAS 3 observations? Okay, well, with that, if you do have any, we're going to give you a 5-minute break to think about it. If you have any questions coming back, please ask. But we're gonna be doing that. Oh, and I apologize, but I did not move to this. So you can be looking at this again, identifies differences between current state and desired level, and this is just kind of what I went through just now. So apologize, I didn't move that slide. So we'll keep that there, and then we have a 5-minute break.
Think your people feel confident working with data? Think again. Visit tableau.com/AI for more.
Score big savings on floral, decor, and more at the Big Spring Sale.
Okay, we'll just do a 5-minute break slide. We'll leave it there. So we'll come back at 9:45. So we'll be back at 9:50.
I was excited to see what the video is going to be about. A little break video.
It was just a clock.
Oh,
but
okay.
I kind of assumed that it would have commercials, and so I was hoping it wouldn't, but there you go.
No problem.
It's 9:51, so I think we're going to get going. Is everyone back?
There's a couple people coming back, and there has been a couple questions in the chat just regarding the time that it started. And I did let one of them know. There was a couple questions or a couple comments stating that the email they received indicated that the meeting started at 9:30. So they were just wondering how to get the information that they missed for the first half an hour. So I had let Sue, I think it was Suzanne, know that there will be a recording posted to the RFGA web posting on the Department of Workforce Services site. Just so you're aware. So if you want to go back and just watch that first half an hour and catch that information and see any questions that were asked. I'm also updating the question and answer page during this meeting. So if there's any questions that come in that we answer that are beneficial to be put on that question and answer, that'll be updated after today as well. So you can see any questions that were answered as part of this meeting. So.
And we'll post that recording today. So as soon as we're finished with this meeting, it takes Zoom a little while just for that video to process, but we will get it up as hopefully by the end of today. Right, Kimber? Okay.
Yes, I'll send it to communications as soon as we're done and have them post it.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, next up we have, let's see.
I think it's me.
Okay, yes, it's yes, Kimber, thank you.
You're so welcome. So I'm going to just continue on and talk a little bit about the expected measures and outcomes as part of the grant. And so as with any grant that you're receiving, we just want to make sure that the data is being tracked and the outcomes are also something that you have come up with that you're realistically able to meet. And so I'm just going to reference a couple points in the RFGA packet. One of them is the attachment B, which is the performance requirement. So if you want to pull that up as you're kind of reviewing and listening to the meeting, you can find that attachment starting on page 55 of the RFGA. And again, I've posted the link to the web posting for this grant a couple times in the chat. So you're able to pull up that RFGA packet from the application tab. And that way, if you want to pull that up and review it, there's some information in the packet itself. The expected outcomes are specifically noted on page 59. And so you can kind of look at that to determine if those are things as you're kind of completing your goals and outcomes for as part of your grant application. You know, you want to make sure that you're taking those things into consideration. Obviously, a lot of the components of this grant are going to be scored as part of that competitive evaluation process. So as you're thinking about the goals and outcomes for each year, just making sure that they're realistic, specific, and then also keeping in mind that as you're creating those goals as part of the application process, more than likely, some of that information is going to be included and kind of made specific to your specific contract. So if you do end up being awarded as a becoming high quality grantee, those outcomes, those goals and outcomes will most likely be added to part of your contract as something that will be monitored. There could be additional outcomes or goals or baseline data that's added to those as well, just kind of based on that application information. So just try to make it as specific and detailed and catered to your program and services that you're providing as possible. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and give some time over to Joe, just so that he can discuss in more detail some of the budget information as part of the grant.
Thanks, Kimber. The budget that you need to complete as part of the application, I believe that's Appendix 2, is a 3-year budget of what you would expect to spend over 3 years of the grant. And there are instructions on the budget document itself, but also Attachment J offers more complete instructions. The overall budget is broken down into 3 different categories. Category 1 and 2 are for administrative budget items, and category 3 is the budget to run your program. And to explain the administration piece first, category 1 is only to be used if you have a NICRA or an approved federally approved indirect cost rate, or if you choose to use the 10% de minimis, which you can use in category 1, and instructions on how that works are included there. If you don't have either of those, then you can include your administrative budget in category 2 of the budget document. But keep in mind that we have a 10% cap on administrative expenses on this grant. So category 1 and 2 combined cannot exceed 10% of your direct budget in category 3. So you will complete on the main budget page, you will complete that for each year of the 3 years that you'll be on the grant, and then it will automatically populate the other tabs on the budget for year 1, year 2, and year 3. Make sure that you include an explanation, a narrative of how you're coming up with the calculations that you're asking for in column B on the budget. And also, if you have multiple sites, there are different tabs for various sites. So make sure you complete a budget for each of the sites that you have. So if, let's, for an example, say that you had 3 sites, you would complete a budget for site 1, 2, and 3 for the first year, what you expect those sites to spend in the first year. Those 3 sites should add up to year 1 on the main budget. And then you would also complete a budget for year 2 and year 3. And when we get to year 2, you will be asked to give us more specific information on your year 2 budget per site, what sites, how that year 2 budget will be broken out per site. And let's see. And if you are going to use a NICRA in category 1 on your budget, also include a copy of your approved agreement letter. And I think that's it. Oh, I did want to mention that as far as how much you should ask for, just to give you an idea of what's being approved. This year, for example, the average approved site, we granted $22,000 per classroom. And I expect it would be a little bit more this year, but that will give you an idea of what you can be asking for per classroom. And with that, I'll turn it over to Emma.
Okay, thank you, Joe. If you have any further questions about the budget while you're filling out the budget, work on those things before the Q&A deadline, and we can answer those publicly so everybody has access to those questions and answers, because that question might be helpful for other applicants too. So, but thanks, Joe, for sharing that with us. Okay, appropriation in sustainability. So just be aware that grantees are expected to have a sustainability plan to maintain high quality programming. We know that this is a hard part of the application just because it's difficult to be able to build on that quality without having funding. So just think through your sustainability plans. Grantees should also consider how to maintain quality while keeping ongoing costs in check. The grant is not designed to provide for ongoing financial support. So this is, funded by both state funding, education funding, as well as CCDF funding. But just be thinking about that in terms of sustainability. And then future programming is subject to new legislation and changes in appropriation. So just always be aware of those things, that this is the significant, a portion of these fundings is through the state and decided through legislation. So we know at different points in time that could potentially change. It could change in terms of we get more funding, and but just think of those things. And then funding information, just to be aware that I'm just going to read through these. So failure to comply with all grant requirements must result in an applicant's ineligibility for an award.
Emma, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. Will you just make sure you change the slide so he can see?
Yes, thank you. Gosh, I'm changing duplicate slides at once, so I apologize. So failure to comply with all grant requirements may result in an applicant's ineligibility for a grant award. Funds can only be used to build high quality early childhood education programs that serve eligible students. So you have to have at least 25% of your students need to be fit into that eligible student criteria. And that's why you complete the eligibility form, is to determine which students meet that criteria. Funds cannot be used to expand preschool programs. That means that if you are wanting to add on classrooms during the contract, that you really shouldn't be adding on classrooms, just because the focus should be on the classrooms that you currently have when you apply, so that we can build the quality. And then if you want to transition onto expansion, you can then expand it out and build and add more classrooms. Grant funding must not supplant current funding. So again, what you're asking for in your budgets, you shouldn't be receiving additional fundings that go towards those things. So you shouldn't be, double dipping in those funds. And if you have questions about those things, you can look at our allowed, disallowed list, as well as ask questions. We've got Trustee Joe on hand, so we can be able to ask him questions as well if questions about supplanting come up. So funds cannot be used for staff bonuses. See attachment I for allowed and disallowed costs. And proposed budget in the grant applications may be adjusted or modified when negotiating contract terms. So just know that after applications have been scored and we are preparing recommendations to recommend to the board, that as program specialists and with the finance team, we do review your requests, and we may be contacting you to provide an adjusted budget that based on on any questions that we might have around what has been proposed. And then the grant funds, they must be spent. So these grant funds do not roll over, even though it's a multi-year grant, they wouldn't roll over to the next year. So just to let you know, the grant funds that you are approved for in year one, that is what you have. If you do not spend those funds, then you couldn't roll those extra funds over to the next year and then have an additional sum on top of what you receive. So it must be spent by June 30th, 2024 for 2-year grants and 2025 for 3-year grants. So they don't carry over. Okay, funding period of performance renewal. So the grant term is July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2024 for a 2-year grant. So those of you that are current grantees and will be reapplying will have that 2-year grant, and then those that are new will have a 3-year grant. Once you've gone through and been approved by the board, it would be for a 3-year contract, so through to June 30th, 2025. Again, just as a reminder, funding is not guaranteed and is awarded at discretion of the board. And then evaluation of the future applicants is also competitive, and current grantee performance will be evaluated in that scoring. So this just lets you know that if we have current grantees this year, so there will be a section that Chelsea and I will score, but it's not your application. It's just it's a small point number system where we score to let them to kind of provide a score depending on how you've been evaluated and your performance throughout the year. So and that is just based on the fact that code states that returning grantees will have priority, and so there additional scores for those grantees. Just wanted to be transparent there. So do we have any questions about funding information or period of performance renewal?
There is a question in the chat, Emma, about Summit Academy said, if we already have plans to add an additional class this fall, can we still apply for the grant but not use any grant funds for the new class?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that's a really good question. We cannot obviously control what you choose to add. So if you want to do that internally, that's completely fine. We just have to work with classrooms that are currently existing. So obviously if you're adding them in the fall, they don't exist yet, but so they have to be functioning. So you can add those, but we would work with the classrooms that you apply for on this grant.
And then just to follow up, we wouldn't be able to add those classrooms for future years on the contract, correct?
Correct. So the plan would then be to transition to, to expansion so that you can expand those classrooms. So the purpose is really to build that quality within those existing classrooms and get you to a level of quality, and then you would expand on expansion grant. Any more questions?
There is another question about supplanting. For the must not supplant current funding rule, does this include other grants?
You could tell us, like on the application, you can tell us if you have current grants going. I'm just not sure which grants. Like we mentioned earlier, there are some rules, and I'm not sure what time you came on, but there are some rules in terms of which people can apply, which programs can apply for this grant. So if, for example, you've been approved for CCQS High Quality and High Quality Plus, or you're receiving the coaching grant through CCQS, you would not qualify. And so if it depends on the grant. So I think what you could do is either in this meeting tell us which grants you're kind of referring to, or you could just send us an email to schoolreadiness@utah.gov. If you don't want to talk about the grants here, we can look into that and research that for you and give you an answer. But let's say you're receiving, some nonprofits receive donations from families, from companies. Those things can be approved, and we can also approve grantees that are coming through that are receiving other grant funds. We just have to know kind of which ones and if they were related specifically to CCQS, just because those funds come through the Office of Childcare. So just let us know. I mean, maybe email schoolreadiness@utah.gov and we can work with you. Okay. Thank you for the questions. If there are any more, please send them our way. We love questions, and we always get a lot more questions when we have meetings with our other grantees. I think that we work with them so closely that they become so comfortable with asking many questions. So don't be afraid to ask the questions if you want to get on the mic, or if you want to ask them through chat, or just let us know. We're here to answer those for you.
Okay, and so as Emma mentioned in the last slide, there is a fairly rigorous review and scoring process for the Becoming High Quality grant. And so again, I'm just going to kind of reference these documents. So if you want to look at them and kind of see what they entail. If you look at attachment G, which is the score sheet for evaluators, that is on page, it starts on page 68 of the RFGA packet. Just so if you want to look at it and see how each question is scored, what the value of each question is. So that is what will be used during the reviewing and scoring process when we get that review committee together to look at those. And then as far as the internal supplemental score sheet for those who are returning applicants, there are specific thresholds that will need to be met. If you are a returning applicant and want to take a look at that, that is on page 73 of the RFGA packet for attachment H. It's indicated on here that for the non-returning, so if you're a new applicant and you're being scored, applicants can receive a total of 130 points. And so when we're looking at those final scores for each application, they need to have at least 75.4 points. Otherwise, we would not be able to consider them for an award. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're looking at that score sheet and how many points each question is worth that you're going to be answering. And then the returning applicants must score at least a -5 on the supplemental score sheets. So again, if you want to take a look at those questions on attachment H, you can find those on page 73. And so then what happens is once that review team is able to score all of the applications and the internal process is done for the returning applicants, we kind of compile the list of those who meet the scoring threshold, and we send that up to be reviewed and essentially approved for each award. We do want to make sure that you understand that any grant applications that are considered for an award are subject to public inspection under the GRAMA Act. So those are available if that is requested. And then also keeping in mind that because there is limited funding for these types of grants, there are times where an applicant may be awarded a partial grant. So of course, when you're submitting your application and putting in your budget, you may indicate how much you would like to receive, but also keep in mind that based on availability of funding and scoring thresholds, you may be awarded a partial grant as well. And then as far as, excuse me, as far as the awarding of the grants, typically, once we have the approval from the board of the list of potential awardees, we will send out typically what we call a letter of intent, just letting you know we intend to award X amount of funds to you. And then there's typically some additional documents that we might have to collect from you, maybe finalize the budget if there's any changes we need to make. And then we will start kind of putting together that contract. That usually takes a couple of weeks, just making sure that all of the required documents are provided. So sometimes there's additional funding information that we need to get from you. There also might be some insurance certificates that we need to collect depending on what type of provider that you are. And then we also do a pre-award risk assessment. And so each grant awardee would be required to complete, we call APARA, that pre-award risk assessment that just identifies what risk level we need to assign for monitoring purposes. So does anybody have any questions about the evaluation process, scoring, or how the grants are awarded before we move on? Okay, awesome.
Thanks, Kimber. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about this Q&A Google form, so I'm just going to pull it up here. So you can submit your questions to schoolreadiness@utah.gov, or through the Google form. And this is what the Google form looks like. So you can put your email here, your applicant name, provider name, and then your question. So you'll notice that when you put your question in here, it won't directly go to the question and answers, which will pop up here. So we've had some questions already, as you can see. So what happens is that form comes to Kimber and myself, and we review the question, and we make sure that the question hasn't already been asked. If it's already been asked, we will still put the question in here, but we will say, you know, or we will let you know as well that there's been asked, and we'll tell you where it's been asked. So, but you can see the question and answers here. And this, you can find this at Department of Workforce Services grants link, where you found the webpage and where you found the application and supporting documents. There will be a tab for Q&A, and you can go in and find this document here, as well as the grant questions Q&A. And just as a reminder, the deadline, and you can also use this PowerPoint. We will be posting this PowerPoint as well, so you can have access to this. And as a reminder, deadline to submit questions and answers, questions, is Wednesday, April 6th, 2022 by 5 p.m. So review your application, review your budget, review, you know, try and get everything complete if you can, as much as you can by this date, so that any questions that come up, you can ask. After that date, we're not supposed to be, you know, Kimber, correct me if I'm wrong, but after that date, we are not supposed to take questions.
That's correct.
Yeah. So work on these items, these documents ahead of time, so that you know what questions. It would be awful if you were trying to fill something out and you didn't know kind of how to fill it out or what to do, and there was a deadline, you know, you went past that deadline. So just review those things and try and anticipate what questions you'll have about them. And then all questions and any possible addenda will be posted no later than Friday 8th, 2022. That just means that on our end, the last day will be the 6th, but on our end, we'll have April 8th to finish entering all of the question and answers on here. So a great thing to do is to come here on April 8th to open this up. On April 8th or April 9th, when you come back into the office, and all of the Q&A answers will be here. And I recommend that you review all of those question and answers, not just the questions that you have, because this may kind of alert something in your mind that you didn't think about, and I can assure you it will be helpful to know the answers to those questions. So any questions about the questions and addenda? Okay, I'm going to transition over to Chelsea. So you're up.
All right, will you switch back to the slideshow, please? Thank you. All right, so we're just going to go over the guidelines for applications pretty briefly, but just know that that the applicant is responsible for the cost of preparing and submitting the proposal. And we do recommend that applicants submit a single application for preschool sites that are under the same tax ID number. If you do have meaningful differences in your programs that kind of affect how it's run, it may be appropriate to apply separately. And then just use the forms provided. So you can find those again at that same website as everything else. Everything should be all together. And you can go to the next one. Next slide. And when you submit the web form, you want to really double check that you have included everything. We really want to emphasize that if a component is not included in your application, it will likely result in a low score, and then you may not get funding. So just really double check that you have everything included. And these are all the the items that you'll need, the grant application narrative, your proposed budget form. And if you have multiple sites, you'll submit one overall budget and then narratives for each location. Then you'll do your funding analysis, elements of high quality, program information, teacher credentials, the letters of support, and then supporting documentation of teacher education levels and certifications. And then you'll have that attachment M if the federal funding and reporting requirements form. And then the next slide kind of shows how it
Sorry, I just wanted
works.
to
Go
add,
ahead.
sorry, I just wanted to add. So just as a reminder, so elements of high quality, teacher credentials, those things are, you know, again, are elements of quality. So if you're not this does not mean if you don't, or your teachers don't have the credentials, it doesn't mean to say that you can't apply. You can. This could just be a gap. So you would talk about that in your gap analysis. And you know, elements of high quality, you do not have to be meeting all of those elements of high quality. Tell us what you're doing well, but provide goals and how you can do better in those areas, but then really tell us what your gaps are. So just wanted to add that to.
Yes, thank you. I think I had intended to say that and I forgot. So I'm so glad that you added that because that is a really important clarification. That's the purpose of this grant, right? Is to build those elements of quality. So kind of tell us what you're doing and what the gap might be. So you will submit your application through Adobe as a web form, which means that you can kind of work on all of the pieces at your own time and kind of save those. And then when you're ready, when everything's ready, you're going to go to that web form and submit everything at once. So hopefully it makes it a lot easier in the past, you know, than what we've done in the past. You'll just kind of, oh, wonderful. Emma's showing us, you'll just kind of see the, you know, you'll have your information at the top. And then as you scroll down, you'll have your executive director, some other contact information if it's different from your main person. And then you'll see at the bottom, go ahead, sorry, Emma, where you just click to attach all of those pieces. So it should be fairly easy to tell if you're missing something or not, but just really be aware again that you want to make sure everything is on there. So just double and triple check that everything is included in your application attachments when you do submit it. And you want to make sure you use the forms that are provided on the website. So don't really change things, just, you know, don't change fonts, don't bother making it look, you know, pretty or cute, like just how it is the best way to keep it that way, basically, all of the forms, just so that it's, you know, it stays in an easy to transfer form to us.
Yeah, and some of these you're going to be creating yourself. Like we have a teacher credential spreadsheet, like Chelsea said, it's titled that way. So just don't change the title. And then letters of support, you're going to be creating a document. I would say label these in the same way. I mean, maybe at the end, this can say what parenthesis 1, close parenthesis 2, supporting documentation. I would put that all in one folder and then click on that folder and you can pull everything in, you can pull it in or make it one PDF with supporting documentation, label it this. And then, so again, like Chelsea said, label, these do not discern between, so if it isn't labeled letters of support, and it is, but you have 2 versions and maybe one version isn't complete and the other one is, and you accidentally pull up the wrong version and attach, and it goes past that deadline, that's what we need to score. We've had other grantees do this before where they thought they uploaded the right document and they actually, I think it was like either missing information or they didn't add in the other document with it. Or they have, you know, so really be careful, have it all organized and have a final product where everything, you know, everything is within that folder, and then pull them in that way. Just because you can attach anything here, you can attach any attachment, right? So it might look as though you've uploaded something there, but just be aware that just make sure that these things are attaching. And so part of that is just organization skills and putting it in the order that you need it so you can upload what you need. And again, apply early so that we can be catching these things and reaching out to you to say, hey, we noticed that you applied, but you're missing, you uploaded, one teacher credential, and we see that you have more than that, right? So just be aware of those things and be extra careful. We've tried to make this application process simple than years past. So, but just be aware that those things, that there could be mistakes that happen here. So just organize on your end so that and label appropriately so there aren't any mistakes, because we want you to be able to score well.
All right. Were there any questions about the application process? If not, I will turn it over to Kimber.
Awesome. Thank you. So speaking of I'm going to pull this up really quick, just so that you have a chance to kind of see where this information is and how you can pull up each of the attachments that we've provided. So like I said, I've kind of listed the web announcement on the DWS Office of Child Care page. Sorry, we're getting an Amber Alert. Hopefully it's not loud. Okay, so on here, this is the main page where the announcement is for the Becoming High Quality grant. And so then if you go over to here to the application tab, you will notice the quite lengthy list of all of the attachments that we've provided for this RFGA. So obviously the first one, we want to make sure you have the complete packet. So if you were to click on that, you're able to open up a PDF version of the entire packet. That is savable. So if it's something that you want to save onto your desktop and be able to go back to, you're welcome to do that. The other one is the grant application itself. So this is the link. When you click on that, that's going to take you into Adobe where that web form is stored. And I think Chelsea mentioned this, but I just want to reiterate it because I do get a lot of questions about this. Once you start this form, you have to complete it in the same sitting. So if you want to pull this up, look at it, see the contents that you need to provide, do that first. And then Emma was kind of showing this, there is the attachments page. So most of these are going to be documents that we have provided for you, and I'll go over each of those. Some of them will be things that you will have to provide. So just kind of make note of that. So for example, those letters of support, that's something that you'll be providing. You'll notice on some of these that there's a red asterisk, and so those are required. So you cannot submit the application unless something is attached to those, and just making sure that what you're attaching is what it actually is. So if you want to click if you want to attach at least one letter of support, make sure that's what you're attaching here. And then if you have additional letters, you can attach 2 or 3. Some people I've noticed in the past will combine them all into like a single PDF and just attach them all here. That's totally fine too. If you have a way to do that, that is 100% okay. But just keep in mind that this will, the application itself, you'll want to make sure that you're able to kind of sit down and provide this information in one sitting. Once you have provided all of the required fields, you will get a little submit button down here. Typically it'll ask you for like your name and email just to verify who's going to be submitting the application. That just allows Emma and myself to make sure we know specifically and exactly who is submitting that application so we don't get them mixed up. Is there a question at all? Yeah.
Yes, Suzanne is wondering if you can print out that application form so that it's easier to fill out in one sitting.
Correct. And that is a good question. I'm glad you asked that, Suzanne. Because it is coming through Adobe, it is something that you will have to be in Adobe to complete. So this itself is not like a fillable form, which I'm going to show you for the next piece of the application. This is a web form, so it kind of goes through electronically through Adobe. So in order for you to be able to fill this out, it's not a savable document.
I think she means like, can she print it so then when she's ready to fill it out, she can go into the web form and fill it out? Does that make sense? So she can
Gotcha.
gather all that information.
And actually, I just tried to right click it and see, you cannot. You could save an image of it, but I don't think it allows you. I mean, you could probably do like a save image and take a screenshot of it, but there isn't like an actual print option. Does that help answer your question?
You could also just take a photo, a couple of photos on your phone as you scroll through. That might be helpful to have that.
Yeah. So again, this will just be the application that you'll upload those documents to. So as far as the next piece, which is the application narrative, so that's going to be kind of like your what do you want to call it, bread and butter of what you are submitting. So this is kind of the longer narrative. This is set up as a fillable PDF. So this actually is something that you can download, save a copy of, put it on your desktop, work on it for a couple minutes. If you have to go to a meeting or something, you can save it, come back to it. And we allowed that just because it is kind of a lengthier process for this one. So all of these fields are something that are either fillable, or you can check mark them. Make sure that you're indicating your organization name when you're filling it out, just so we know that it is being attached to the application, the correct application that you're submitting. You'll notice that those goals and outcomes are listed on here. So again, this is more of like the bread and butter contents of the goals and services and things that you're going to be providing in that application narrative. So that'll be one of the first documents that you'll want to make sure that you attach to the web form, to the application itself. Oh yeah, and Samantha's giving some guidance on how to screenshot. So thank you for that. Okay, so that is the application narrative. So again, that's going to be Appendix 2, which is being attached to the application. The next one that you're going to be, when you click on the proposed budget form, it's going to download for you. And I don't know if you can see this down here. I have kind of a list of the things that are downloadable Excel documents. So Appendix 3 comes as a downloadable Excel spreadsheet. So I'll just go ahead and open that so you can see what that looks like. So again, this is something that as you're working through your application, you're going to be completing this budget. You want to make sure that you are keeping it in Excel format. I know sometimes in the past people have used, like, if you're on a Mac or different than just a regular desktop computer, sometimes you kind of have to get it back to its original form. So we want to make sure that you're submitting it as an Excel document. There is some instruction in the RFGA packet about submitting this. So we want to make sure that you are attaching a copy of your completed budget to the application itself. So when you're submitting this web form, you're attaching the budget form. And then also making sure that you are emailing a copy of the original Excel spreadsheet completed with your budget information to that schoolreadiness@utah.gov email, just so we're getting a final Excel version of that budget. And then the next one is
Kimber, sorry, would you mind going back to Appendix 3, please?
Sure.
Joe mentioned this in his when he chatted earlier, but beneath you'll see the organization total in the first tab. Then you'll see year 1, 2, and 3. And when you complete those, the organization total should populate, right? So that populates. If you have just one site, that's all you need to do. However, if you have, if you have well, you do site one, but if you have 2 sites, if you have 3 sites, you have 4 sites, you do have to do a breakdown of all those sites. And like Joe mentioned, those sites should total year 1. So all of those you would add up site 1 through 6. And you would that total site through 1 through 6 should total up to year 1. But we don't need a site breakdown for year 2 or year 3. We just want a total. You can submit those year 2 and year 3. If any of you have more than 6 sites, you could then, all you do is just add, see this add symbol. You could add, and then you go to the top left hand side and you highlight that. You can do Control-C, which is copy, and then you move over to the next tab, and you can type in site 7 and then copy and paste. Control-V, sorry, which is paste.
I don't have it saved, so it's not letting me do
Yeah.
it.
It's okay. It's okay. And then on that final tab that Kimber has there that says sheet 1, you would just put site 7. We just put 6 sites because we just didn't know. And then I think if you have a lot of sites, though, I think that we did say, don't we say on there that we only need an example of actually 6? They wouldn't need to add on another one. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we had put in the RFGA to do up to 6.
That's right.
And then just make sure that for each site sheet that you're completing, the individual site name will go on each sheet. So site 1 would be, one location, site 2 would be a different location. So just make sure that you're indicating on the site or location name which site that is.
That's right. So you do not actually need to add a different tab. That explanation was futile, but if you want to add a different tab and move stuff over, that's how you do it, right? But I only do 6. If you have, we've got some school districts that have lots and lots of sites, and we don't want, that's too much information and too much work for all of you. So just do a total of 6 max.
Except if you're having fun, filling
Yeah,
out the application. Just keep going. No. So there was a question in the chat that I answered, but I just wanted to make sure everybody saw. Our sites share the same tax ID number, though different physical locations. Should we continue to fill out the different site tabs? The answer is
yes.
Yes.
Yes. Great question.
And then she says, then your tabs is the total of the sites, correct?
Yes, exactly. So year one would be the total of the sites. And then if you scroll to the left arrow, Kimber, the tab that says, the first tab that says org total, that will calculate years 1, 2, and 3. And then give you a total budget for years 1, 2, and 3.
And that will populate in Excel, so they don't have to do that math. Okay.
Yes, our lovely finance people have formatted that for us. So thank you, Joe and Keisha.
Yes, thank you.
All right, good questions. I think we're okay to move on. And thank you for that clarifying information, Emma. That was probably very helpful. So the next one, which is Appendix 4, is going to be the funding analysis worksheet. So I'll go ahead again. If you just click on this, it'll download and then you can pull it up. And so that is also going to be an Excel spreadsheet that you can provide that information on. And, it's savable. You can come back to it. So if there's things that you need to work on. So I'm just checking any questions. Oh, yes, school readiness. Thank you. Okay, so then for this one, if there's additional funding sources that you're receiving, we just want to make sure that, again, and Emma kind of talked about this from one of the questions that we had. So if you're receiving different types of funding, we want to make sure we know what those are, because again, there could be some that we're like, oh yeah, you can receive, both types of funds, totally fine. There might be others where it's like, well, we actually can't, we're not allowed to let grantees double dip, with certain grants and becoming high quality. So we just want to make sure that those are being reported and recorded as part of the application process. So again, that will be something that you can save. And then once it's all ready to go, you would attach it to the application page where we have the.
So I just wanted to add, sorry,
Yeah,
again,
keep going.
that spreadsheet that Kimber just showed you is, so we had a question earlier, how do we know, can we receive other grant funding on this grant? And that's a great, that document right there is the place where you would put your funding so that you can declare that, and we can just make sure that there isn't any supplanting going on.
Yes, correct. Thank you. Okay. And so then moving on to the next one, we have the elements of high quality. And so this one is actually going to be, and I'll get this pulled up. So that is Appendix 5. This is also a fillable PDF that you can download, save, work on it, come back to it. There is a lot of information that you're going to be providing in this. So don't feel like this is something that you have to complete in one sitting, because we have allowed it so that you don't have to. So again, as you're going through this, the boxes are fillable. It's the nice thing is that we have already formatted this for you in the font size and format that it needs to be, so you don't even need to worry about changing it. And then as far as completing the form, there are the fields are required, and so just make sure that you're completing each of the fields for the information that you need to provide before you complete it. Otherwise, you may not be able to submit it. Is there a question that coming in? Oh, so there was a sorry, there was a question from the previous form. Summit is asking, do we put tuition funding from parents on that form, or would it only be grant funding that they're receiving?
Are you asking Emma?
I don't know the answer to that question, so I was going to defer to either one of you.
Are we asking, so the question of, should the form that Kimber just shared with everyone, should that be declared here? So in terms of tuition, I don't think you need to declare tuition. I think this is based off of any other grants that you're receiving, or any funds that you might be receiving from the state or federal funding, or potentially contributions and donations that might equal to a potential supplanting. So Joe, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I would agree with that, yeah, you don't need to list tuition there, just other funding sources that you may have.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
We do have another question.
Mhm.
Oh, no, we don't, sorry.
Oh, okay, I think it was just a clarification from Sam.
Thanks,
So when
Sam.
you're sending things to the school readiness email, just make sure that you are indicating your program, just so we know who we need to attach that document to. So thank you for that clarification as well. So as far as this elements of high quality, as far as, and Emma kind of spoke on this a little bit, talking about just indicating what your gaps are in your program and maybe any plans for improvement. One thing that we also kind of want to make sure is that, as far as the gap analysis, if there's things as part of your program that you feel like are going well, or, you're doing well in, you can include that as well. It doesn't just have to be things that you're struggling with or things that need improvement. So you can add that information as well. But the goal is to identify things that maybe need to be improved upon. And then what is your plan for that? Again, this will be part of the application that is scored. And so just making sure that you're being as clear and concise and providing as much detail as is needed. And of course, you have a selective box that you have to fill in. So if you fill it all the way up, that's great. But you have a little bit of room to do that. So Emma, do you want to add anything to this specific document?
I think that just again, and I think I've said this a couple of times, just be sure that even if this is a strength, talk about ways in which you can improve. And then if it really is a gap in areas of these elements, and a gap means, by gap we mean, if you're not doing these things, or if you're doing it at the minimal level and you know that you need improvement in those areas, tell us that, and tell us what you're doing, tell us what you would like to do, and that would actually be added into the plan for improvement. And you can even ask and provide a little bit of explanation, like, we haven't been able to do this, or we're working on, we would love to have coaches, but we just don't have coaches right now and would like to be able to provide that support to our teachers. Add that in the plan of improvement. In this area, there's only a minimum amount of space, as you can see. So be as concise as you can be. And if you feel that you're going over, that means that you're adding a bit too much. I would make it neutral. So you don't need to kind of add. Actually, what I will say is you don't add your program name in there. You don't need to say we at this elementary school are doing this, because we already know that this is your program. Also, we have to go through everything and redact all of that information anyway for the scorers. So just tell us what you're doing in those areas. You don't need to repeat. I've had some programs repeat who they are in every single box, and we don't need to know. We don't need to have that information. We know it's attached to your program. Everything will go into the same folder. So, just tell us what you're doing in those areas, but you don't need to kind of tell us who you are, and you don't need to name the names of your teachers. Just provide an information of what the gap is, and what your plan for improvement is, and keep it concise, but don't go over that box, because the scorers are not going to be able to see that information, and so you're going to lose points if you go over, because we're going to miss that information.
There's a question from Jessica in the chat. She's wondering if she can apply for this grant for some of their locations, if some are already high quality, but others are not.
So I guess, Jessica, my question is, how do you know that they're quality? Like, have you had them defined through the CCQS program, define them through quality? Do you want to get on the mic and we can ask you some questions?
Yes, so I am actually here representing my owner, Jody Zabriskie. So one of the questions that we just had was, so we have 6 locations. One is we just acquired recently, and the other one we are required. So neither of them are on the CCQS level yet. One of them will be able to start this summer because she's been there. We did have, with our observations, out of the 4 centers we did have before, only 2 of them got high quality and the others barely missed it. So we just want to make sure that we can apply for this grant still if only some of them got high quality and others did not.
Are they on, do you know if they're on the same tax ID number?
Yes, we are all on the same tax ID as far as I know. Yes.
Okay, we will need to look. I think that we will need to look into that. Joe, do you have an answer on hand, or are we going to need to talk about this?
I think we need to talk about it a little bit, if that's all right.
Okay, so we I've written your question down, and we will also answer this in the Q&A, but we can reach back out to you directly. So remind me of your name. Is it Jessica?
It's Jessica Black, and you can reach me at Jessica, all lowercase, at a2zbuildingblocks.com.
So what we'll do is we will answer this publicly so that everybody has the answer, but we will send you an email with the same response, just so that you see that answer, Jessica.
Okay.
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 I think so. Joe, are there any other questions, follow-up questions that we might need to ask? So there's 4 centers, 2 got onto high quality, 2 did not, but they have the same tax ID number. Is there any other information that we could ask more info?
Yeah, I can't think of anything else that we would need.
Okay. All right, and we might pull in the CCQS team too and ask some questions from them. So, all right, well, thank you for your question, Jessica. We don't have an answer right now, but we will get you an answer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Emma. And then I was just going to follow up just before we move on from the from Appendix 5 for the elements of high quality. Are there any other questions about this before we move on? Or are we good? Okay, great. Okay, so I will move on. The next appendix that will need to be completed and attached as part of the web form application is the program information. So I will go ahead and get that one pulled up as well. And so this is just kind of a kind of more specific provided information regarding the specifics of the program. It looks like there's a couple different tabs that you want to make sure that you are completing for each of these. On the location information, you'll kind of notice that we had a couple of examples that we put on here. So as far as the locations, lead teacher information, session times, and coach information. So you're able to provide that for each of the classrooms that you're submitting as part of the grant. Emma, do you want to provide any additional details for the content of this at all, or?
I think really this information is really important for us as program specialists, just because otherwise we have to pull all of this information individually, and it helps us to be able to, if you do come onto the grant, that we can have all this information here and have a little bit of a better understanding about your program. It also helps with potential questions that we might have after the scoring phase. If this doesn't answer all of our questions, we will then most likely be reaching out to you to ask follow-up questions so that we can make the appropriate recommendations to the board. So just know that, we know that it's a lot of information, it's a lot of documents to upload, but it really helps us on our end in terms of understanding the program a little bit more without knowing you, especially if you're a new applicant. Once you're an applicant, like we have so much information, and we've been working with you for a year, that we have a lot of that info, and but because you're new and we haven't had that rapport with you and don't know that information, then it's just helpful on our end to have that.
Awesome. I don't think I saw any questions come in for this one. So again, this is a savable Excel spreadsheet that you can work on. And then once you are ready to submit that, you would attach that as part of the web form for program information. And
Just
then,
to clarify, Emma
Yes.
was saying we meet with our current grantees a lot. Even if you're a current grantee, you still need to fill out that form for the application. I just wanted to like make sure that was crystal clear. A lot of times we know all that information, but you still have to provide that for the application.
that's really good, actually. Thank you for saying that. Yes, so make sure, even if you are a current grantee, that you are completing that information and submitting it as well. And then as far as Appendix 7, so this is kind of a two-part thing. So we have provided the teacher credentials spreadsheet, which I'll get that pulled up here as well. And so on here, we're just wanting to make sure that you are providing the specific details of who your lead teacher is, and then what type of degree or that documentation for their credentials. Let me scroll over on this a little bit. And then if there are teachers who do not currently meet those credentials, provide a brief explanation. And we have provided some examples for you in these yellow boxes here, just for, if you have to provide any additional information. And then, if for some reason they don't currently have that certification, what is the goal for that, and what are they doing to meet that, to get that accreditation, and then what is the goal date for when they will be receiving that as well. And then Emma, did you want to speak to any of that at all as far as the time frame for that?
Yeah, so this is part of actually one of the legislative changes. So and this is particularly for expansion. So this could be a gap for a while for you who are on becoming, but on expansion, that the teachers are expected to have their credentials, which would be either a CDA, or an associate's in an early childhood related field within year 2. If that's a continuation of a gap, that's fine. We do want you to be working on these things, but we understand that there are hierarchies, and there might be other things that you're focusing on in terms of closing those gaps. But just know that your teacher education, whether that is an element of quality, of understanding developmentally appropriate practices, and having those ongoing credentials and professional developments are obviously really important to have when your teachers are working closely with those kiddos. So this is just really to help us to know the teachers that you have in your classroom, and where they are and what they're working on. Some programs already have the credentials on this grant, and it's not a gap. They have other things that are gaps. So you'll notice as we meet, in PLCs each month, and this will be later down the road, like if you're approved onto the grant, that there'll be different gaps. So this is just to help us to know where your teachers are and what the goals are that you have for these credentials.
Awesome, thanks, Emma. So in addition to this, so you're going to be filling this out. This is a document that we provide for you that you can download and work on and save. And then in addition to that, one of the other attachments that you will be providing is the supporting documentation of the lead teacher credentials. So as you're filling out that Excel spreadsheet and indicating what credentials they have, we also want to make sure that you are providing that supporting documentation of what those credentials are. So that will be an additional attachment then to the teacher credential spreadsheet, and that'll be something that you will be providing. So you are welcome to kind of save all those documents together as a PDF and upload those together. If you have multiple that you need to submit, again, that's something that you can do. Make sure that you're at least attaching what you can as far as those teacher credentials documentation to the application, because that is one of the required fields. And then you are welcome to email the remaining credentials to that school readiness at utah.gov. And again, just making sure that you're including your organization name or program or site, so we know who that's being attached to. Are there any additional questions about the teacher credentials? Okay, I don't see anything coming in. Oh, there is a question. For letter of support, is it best to create one letter of support and have the entire admin team sign one letter? Or should we have a support letter for each individual person?
So this is a great question. I think it depends on what you want to do. What we want to see here is so there are times when we go into programs and excuse me, teachers don't know anything about the grant. They didn't know we were on the grant, or there are going to be some expectations and requirements, reporting, the PLCs, coaching. So there's going to be kind of more requirements than what you're usually used to maybe on this grant. And sometimes, you know, a superintendent or a director or an owner might not be aware of those things. So really this letter is helping us to, it's really helping us to know that you've had that communication with the owner, with the director, with the, you know, some have done teachers, just to make sure that we know everybody's on the same page and that they understand and approve that that you want to kind of be on this grant. It really is, if you want to go with a teacher, you can just do a sample. You could just maybe do one and have the teachers sign, or really it's about directors and owners and those in positions that could maybe say, well, we didn't realize it was going to be this much work. It's not, you know, maybe, you know, or I didn't realize they were going to be coming in to do ECHAS 3 observations, or I didn't realize you're going to have to spend this much time going to, you know, PLCs or doing coaching. It's just to help them to understand, you know, the requirements of the grant and to be on the same page and to be on board and supportive. And that looks a little bit different for everyone. So think about that and think about who you might need to kind of contact to get people on board and to kind of get those letters of support.
Thank you for that clarification, Emma, and for answering that. I don't think I saw any other questions come in, and that was actually a good segue to the letters of support. So that is, again, just something that you want to make sure that you are collecting. That's not a document that we're providing as part of the application process. So as you're getting those letters of support, that they are kind of in a downloadable form, and then you're able to attach them here. I think I mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate, you want to make sure you're attaching at least one letter of support. If you have them all collected as a single PDF, you're welcome to do that. And then any additional, you can do that on the second and third attachments for those as well. All right, so for our last attachment as part of the application process, this is what we call the FFATA, which is the Federal Reporting Funding Act attachment. And it's basically just kind of a reporting requirement for federal funding. It is required that this be completed, with the exception of state agencies and component units are not required to complete this. So if there is a state agency who is applying for this grant, it is not required that you complete this. One of the biggest things that I always have to go back to on this application that is just small, so it kind of gets missed. In addition to adding the organization's name, just make sure that you're check marking the box yes or no. A lot of times it'll be no, but sometimes we've seen a yes here or there. And so if that is the case, based on number 1 or number 2, you would want to identify the executive compensation name, title, and the compensation level. If it's no, then you basically just check mark that box, make sure that you are just at least completing an electronic signature date, and then indicate name and title of the person that's completing the form. So again, this is provided as a fillable document, a PDF that you can download, complete, and then you will be attaching that as the last attachment for the FFATA. We didn't make it required just because those who are state agencies or component units don't have to do it. So we don't want to make you put something on there that you don't really need. So that is it as far as the attachments, documents that you're submitting as part of the application. I think I mentioned this before. As soon as you have everything completed that's required on the application, you would see a submit button typically down here that you can click on. I did see a question come in from Jessica, and this is kind of a newer thing, so I'm glad you're asking about this. So some of you may know this, that the organization who takes care of this is getting rid of the DUNS number, and it's being replaced by what's called a UEI number. And so there are some instructions, and I can actually provide the little sheet that we were given for how to note how to identify what your EUI number is if you're not aware of what that is. So I will get that pulled up for you and put it in the chat just so that you have it. I will also make sure that that question is answered on the question and answer page. So if you need to go back to after this pre-bidders meeting, you can do that as well. But I'm glad you asked about that, because that is a new thing that they just did a couple months ago. So that's a good question. Any other questions around the application itself or the attachments that I missed, or that you feel we need to talk about or go back to? Okay, I'm hearing silence. So with that, I don't know about all of you, but I could use a break. So let's take 5 minutes. It's 11:08 right now. So let's have you come back by 11:13. So we'll see you in just a few minutes.
Oh, World Sea Turtle Day. I love sea turtles.
We're going to do a relaxing sea turtle because this is a lot of information and you all need to relax. So can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay. Now I want to listen to the puppy one.
That was lovely, Emma. Lovely.
So relaxing. Can you see this screen, Samantha?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll give everyone a little bit to get back. Maybe when it's 11:15, we'll start. I hope that relaxed everyone. Okay, it's 11:15. So let's get going. I said the next agenda item that we have is budget. So I'm going to pass the time to Joe. You there, Joe? We might need to give Joe a little bit more time.
It was too relaxing, Emma. Joe's taking a nap.
He's officially asleep, so.
We love Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll message him. Does anybody have any questions while we're waiting? Have you all had a chance to be able to look at the Q&A? Hopefully. Do we have maybe Keisha? Are you on the line, Keisha?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Would you be willing to go through these slides, or would you prefer we wait for Joe?
I can try the best I can. I
Okay.
don't know what Joe's doing. He doesn't seem to be being responsive, so I will do what I can here.
Okay, and then if we and just know that if there are questions, we can answer those questions for you as we go, or if we don't have the answers right now, we can get those questions out.
Okay. So I know Joe had talked a little bit about the breakdown of the budget earlier, so this just goes into more in depth about each of those categories. The first category is the indirect expenses. I'm sorry, I'm just going to mostly cover what's on the slides because I don't know what other detail Joe would go into here. But the NICRA is something that you have to get federally approved for, and then you would use whatever percentage that percent given to you would be, and that would be what is reimbursed to you. Or you could do the de minimis rate. There are some special rules with the de minimis rate, though, if you do choose to go with that, and that is detailed on the budget narrative. And if you do pick the de minimis, then you must use that across all your grants. So you have to really make sure you know what you're doing if you decide to pick that de minimis one. And then the indirect expenses and the direct administrative expenses are all capped out at 10%. You can go to the next.
Kimber, would you mind pulling up, now that Keisha has kind of explained this, would you mind just pulling up the budget form, and I'll let you present, and we can just kind of go through what we mean by like NICRA, just look at the difference. So NICRA and de minimis are cover category 1. So this is going to cover the category 1. There is a breakdown there of NICRA and de minimis. And in cell B11, you can see it says indirect costs. That's where you would define, you would tell us, are you using a NICRA rate or are you using a de minimis rate? So you would write NICRA or de minimis here, and then you would put your amount. Like, so you would put if you're doing NICRA there, you would tell us what the NICRA amount was, and then if you're doing de minimis, if you're doing NICRA, you would tell us NICRA, and you would give us the percentage of what you've been federally approved for. So a lot of, correct me if I'm wrong, but like school districts have a NICRA, so there are school district changes by percentage. Jessica Smith, every school district has like a different NICRA rate, is that correct?
I haven't heard of NICRA before. I've heard of the indirect cost rate. So yeah, so yes, they do. They get a new one each year.
Yeah, so that percentage will fluctuate and change. So as a school district, you would have to find out on the spreadsheet that is changes every year, and tell us what your school district percentage is. And then you would provide us an amount for that. And then if you're de minimis, you would give us that, obviously that rate can be charged at 10%. And if you could just scroll down, that's just for the category 1. And then category 2, did you did you want to go through this category 2? I think that the category, is there a category, there's a category 3 too. So category 2, if the organization does not have a NICRA and chooses not to use a de minimis, then you can break down category 2. So Keisha, I'm going to pass it to you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So yeah, if you don't do the NICRA or the de minimis, then you have category 2, which is your direct administrative expenses. And you would break out here what you are wanting to be reimbursed for those. And then the itemized detail is kind of like what Joe was saying. Fill in there where you're getting your numbers from so that we have an idea of how you're totaling them. And that also cannot exceed 10% of it. So like if you only use the direct administrative expenses, those also cannot exceed 10% of the program expenses, which will be listed in category 3. Now, was there a slide for direct administrative expenses? And then
Okay. So let me pull up my screen now, and you can move to this piece. Yeah.
it looks like Joe might be back. Maybe he'll be better to take over from here.
Yeah.
I think you were doing a great job.
Oh, well, thank you.
So, yeah, as we mentioned earlier, category 1 would be for a NICRA or de minimis. And if you don't have that, then we would be, you would use your category 2 to put administrative expenses that you're directly charging to the grant or budgeting for the grant in category 2, and break those out in the different line items. Keisha, I'm sorry, Keisha covered category 1.
Yeah.
And category 2 is direct administrative budget. And these would be directly charged to the grant. And the total of the 2 categories, 1 and 2, cannot exceed 10% of the total program cost. And category 3 is where your program budget will go and include any calculations or explanations as far as how you came up for the expenses for the different line items. Everything should be reasonable and necessary to run the program. There is an example of allowed and disallowed costs in the packet that will give you an overview of what's allowed and not allowed. And you can also, if you have specific questions on if something's allowed, you can ask that in the question answer format. We've talked about including your calculations. And if you put 0 in a category, you don't need to provide a comment with that.
Thank you so much, Joe. Kimber, sorry to do this again, but could you, because Joe mentioned you don't need to put a comment. So can we just show the budget again and just explain what Joe means by putting a comment, because this part is really important, and we will have to reach out to you after scoring if you don't provide enough information. So you can see that actually this one right here. So if you go down to category, let's do category 3, for example. So you can see that in column A29 through to A36, you have program expenses. And then in the B column, this is where, so when Joe says notes, this is what he means. So you would need to provide a detailed explanation as to what you would like in areas of materials and supplies, and staff and travel, those kinds of things. So we would need a breakdown. So let's say you're looking at materials or equipment. Well, let's look at materials and supplies. So you need some materials and supplies for your classrooms. You need some things for dramatic play, for science and math. You need some maybe for nature and science, and that's kind of a gap. You're missing a lot of those materials. You can break those things down. So let's say you're asking for $10,000 in materials and supplies for each of your classrooms. We would want to see a breakdown of what you need. So let's say materials and supplies in terms of science, we would want a breakdown of what you would plan to buy for those things. And that might seem like a lot, but it helps us to understand as program specialists what we're approving, as well as Joe, when Joe's reviewing, and Keisha, and reviewing your budgets, and we're making sure that it's appropriate. We want to have a breakdown. So we will reach out to you if we don't have that. So just be as transparent as possible, and as descriptive as possible. That is also going to help in scoring. It will help the scorers to know what exactly you need. If you just put one sentence and then a larger amount, they're not going to have any additional information, and they're going to have a lot of questions. So your budget needs to make sense, and it needs to be able to apply back to your gaps. So also focus in on your gaps and what your gaps are and what you need, and make sure that there are descriptions and funding and budgeting going towards those gaps that you have. This money also does not just cover salaries, so just be aware of that. If you're going to put the majority of your money in salaries, we're going to come back and ask you to spread that money around. So just be aware of those things. Joe, is there anything that you wanted to add to that, or Keisha?
For the, like Emma was saying, include your explanation. And another example would be with your salaries. It might be a good idea to list which positions are included in that, and an average rate of pay for those positions, how many hours per week those positions are working. That would be an example of what we'd want to see so we could recreate how you came up with the budget number.
Yeah, the more information you can give us, the better. And it tells us a story, and it helps us to be able to connect it back to what your gaps are and what your needs are. It's extremely helpful, and it's also extremely helpful for us as program specialists to know, for the finance team, as well as the scoring committee. And I remember, obviously, all of this is getting scored. And so if they're lacking information, they're going to score lower, because they don't have the information that they need to be able to justify giving you a higher score. So just be aware of those things. Okay, any questions about category 1, 2, and 3 for budgeting? Okay. All right. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Keisha. So I think the time now is Kimber. So it's over to you, Kimber.
Awesome. Okay, so let's just kind of go through a couple things really quick. I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of everything that you're going to be turning in. So we have provided that again, just so you have the list of attachments. And keep in mind, these, the appendices are the documents that we are going to be, provided for you, so that you can download those, or as far as the application coverage sheet, that is provided as the web form that you will be completing and submitting in Adobe. And then the additional documents that you will be providing are listed as part of the additional attachments on that second page. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Emma. So the appendices are indicated separately. And then as far as the attachments, and I'm just going to go through a couple of these specifically in the next few slides. Specifically attachment A, which is our typical terms and conditions for grants that are being received through Department of Workforce Services. Please just know that if you are a state agency or a component unit, you may see a little bit of a different terms and conditions or a supplemental terms and conditions in a contract if you are awarded. So we're just kind of going over the DWS grant terms and conditions for typical contracts. And then again, if you want to look over those performance requirements and what is required as part of the grant, if you are awarded, those can be found on attachment B. As far as the code of conduct, the background check policy, and the non-disclosure agreement, we include those as part of the RFGA packet, and they're typically included as part of a contract if you are awarded the grant, because we want to make sure that those are, number one, provided to you, but also those are part of some of the monitoring components. And so we just want to make sure that you are aware of those requirements. So if you have employees or volunteers that are working as part of the grant, that you are keeping a signed completed copy of the code of conduct non-disclosure agreement, and that they have a current background check. Those things might be looked at as part of a monitoring process. So just making sure that you're keeping those on file, whether it's stored in a secure tangible file folder or as an electronic version, that is stored securely as a virtual means. And then there's also some components for things like data sharing, what that will look like as part of the outcomes and measures. I had mentioned these before, so the score sheet for first-time applicants, and then the score sheet for returning applicants, if you've currently been on the grant, are included as well. We talked a little bit about some of the budget and cost information. So there are two documents included for that, which is the allowed and disallowed costs for the types of for the type of funding that's being used for this grant. And then also some budget instructions. So as you're kind of going through and completing your budget and you're like, oh, what did they say? You can refer to attachment J for some of those budget instructions. And then attachment K is that eligibility form. So again, that would be something that would be included in a contract if you receive the grant. We've also provided some application examples. So again, as you're going through and completing the questions and filling out your narrative and you're just like, gosh, I'm not really sure what to put here, you can refer to attachment L, and it has some really good details as far as some examples of answers that could be given as part of that narrative, or things that you're providing and attaching to your application. And then we've included the FAFATA certification. And then we also kind of provided just an application checklist just to kind of help you with keeping track of like, okay, have I done this? Is this done? You're welcome to use that if you want to print it off and check mark things. I know sometimes people who are like uber organized like to do something like that and kind of have their little checklist that they're marking off, and it makes them feel good. And then when you're done, you can have a treat. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to detail, and I'm going to try really hard not to take too long on these. There's just a couple kind of important pieces to note as part of those grant terms and conditions. Of course, we're using federal funding. We're monitoring, so we want to make sure that you are following directions and doing the right thing as you're receiving this grant money. So one of the first things that I like to talk about is number 3 in the terms and conditions, which is conflict of interest. So basically, we just want to make sure that if you are going to be receiving this grant funding, employees that are working under this agreement, that none of the owners, directors, officers, or employees are relatives of an employee of DWS. And they do kind of detail that out. It could be as broad as your mother-in-law, or it could be specifically your spouse. So we just want to make sure that that conflict of interest is not taking place. If you are just not sure if someone that's going to be working under this grant, if it could be a conflict of interest of a party, contact one of us. I'm available, Emma's available. We're happy to help you kind of make that discernment and how to move forward with that. So we just want to make sure that you're doing things correctly. And then the next one that I typically like to talk about that kind of is in line with this one is number 5, which is related parties. And again, it's kind of a similar thing where if you're receiving these grant funds, that you're not making payments to related parties without prior written consent. So again, you've got to get that written consent before you do it. If it's something that's coming up, if there is a related party. And again, it does define this pretty specifically. It could be your parent, it could be a grandparent, or a grand relative, or even as extended as in-laws. So just kind of make sure that you're aware of those things and submitting any requests to Emma or myself.
Yeah, and just as a reminder that we do have a related parties form, like Kimma mentioned, so that needs to come from you. We don't know if you have a sister or a relative in the program. You would need to reach out to us and let us know, and then we can send you the appropriate documentation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, and then the next one, if you want to go to the next slide, Emma, thank you. And this is just kind of a continuation of that. And like she mentioned, there is a form that can be completed and submitted so that we are made aware of the possibility of there being a related party. So we just want to make sure that that gets submitted. And then the next one is just as far as monitoring goes. So in attachment B, which are those performance requirements, there's a lot of information and discussion about kind of performance requirements, outcome requirements. Along with that is kind of the monitoring component of receiving a grant. And so, as Office of Child Care being kind of the owner of this grant or contract, once you receive a contract, there are some kind of monitoring requirements. So we just kind of want to make sure, and really like our goal is to make sure that applicants and organizations are successful, that they're meeting those monitoring requirements. We try to make them, kind of fair and something that everybody would be able to meet. And so if for some reason we gather information and monitoring performance requirements aren't being met, then we would kind of come up with a plan to kind of help you. And that's the biggest thing, is we want you to be successful. We want you to be able to continue receiving these grant funds. So typically we'll kind of do, kind of a written like, hey, this is happening. We need to figure out how to get you in compliance or make sure that these things are being provided. If that doesn't happen, it can mean suspension of payments, or, worst case scenario, it could mean being terminated from the grant itself. So just know that typically that monitoring is set up as part of your contract. And if things like reports or documents are required, that they will be requested prior to them being due. So that's just kind of part of that monitoring process. And then if for some reason a grantee is not able to either remain in compliance or get back into compliance, if there's things that they are not able to correct, there are different types of termination that could occur. So for example, if there's a cause for termination, you know, if we've indicated, hey, there's something missing, or there's a performance requirement not being met, we need to see you, you know, fix this. You've got this many days to get into compliance. And that doesn't happen, that would be a for cause termination. So we typically provide ample communication and time for you to be able to do that. And then we would terminate the contract. There are certain situations where if there is a risk of harm, if there's certain provisions that are not being met, there are times where it is just an immediate termination. There is no written notification notice, and the grant could be terminated. So there's also no cause termination. So if, for example, because you know this is a becoming high quality, there may come a time where you have met high quality and you are no longer eligible for the grant. So you notify us of that. That could be considered a no cause termination. So we just want to make sure that you're communicating those things to us so we know what action to take. But those are some of the different types of termination that could happen. There's always kind of a notice, letter, something to that effect involved, regardless of the type of termination that it is. So, and then Emma, if you want to go to the next one, I'll just talk shortly. This is really just kind of some continuation of why some terminations could happen. Just for sake of time, I'm not going to go into those for too much. Just know that that is number 18 in the terms and conditions. If there is something specific that you want to know in those, that's where you can find those. And then the next term and condition is going to be just staying in compliance with those generally applicable state and federal laws. So just making sure, and again, there's a lot of information kind of chunked in here. And so we just kind of want to make sure that you're in compliance with state and federal laws. There's a lot of like executive orders, Hatch Act, different acts that are included with this. So again, if there's something specific that you have a question on, some of this includes like age discrimination, the Rehabilitation Act, Civil Rights Act, those types of things. So those are included in number 30 of the general DWS terms and conditions. And then the next one after 30 is going to be, there's a little bit more information on this. So one of the things on this one that I did want to make sure was the workers' compensation insurance, and just making sure that any grantee that receives funding maintains the workers' compensation insurance during the term of the agreement for its employees or subcontractors related to the agreement. So just making sure that that workers' compensation does cover the full liability under workers' compensation for anybody who is working under the grant. And then the next one that we just want to make sure we highlight is that code of conduct and then the grievance procedure. So I did kind of talk a little bit about the code of conduct, and that is included, that will be included as an attachment of part of the contract that you receive if you receive funding. And then if for some reason there is a grievance, there is a procedure that kind of is put in place as far as, being able to kind of provide in writing what that grievance or concern is. So just know that that is in place as well during the time that you are receiving the grant. And then use of client records and just the protection of that. So again, just making sure that anyone who is working under the grant receiving does keep information of any client records confidential. As far as if there's misuse or misappropriation, or if something kind of gets put out there in the universe that wasn't supposed to be, just make sure that you're notifying us of that if there is an unlawful disclosure of information. Of course, we're working with kids and families and things like that, so we want to make sure that we're keeping that identifiable information confidential. If there's any breach, we just, again, want to make sure that we're notified of that so we can kind of work with our legal and security team to know how to handle that situation. And then as far as the records that are being received as part of the grant, and this is just kind of for auditing purposes, we make sure that everybody who is receiving a grant knows that if for some reason there's an audit or someone comes in and wants to review things from your program, just make sure that you are retaining and maintaining any records of things that are happening within the grant, the funding that you're receiving for at least 6 years. So you're kind of keeping that on file or in a secure virtual means. And then I'll talk pretty quickly about insurance. And so again, as far as there are some specific entities that are required to provide like a proof of insurance, and that is for the duration of the grant. So if you are awarded initially, we will request a certificate of insurance, the liability insurance from you. It does need to be current. So for example, if you provided one tomorrow, we would just need to make sure that it is current and valid and doesn't expire anytime in the next couple of months. And then we typically make sure that that's continued on for the duration of your grant. So again, just keeping in mind whether you're going to be on a 2-year or a 3-year would depend on how long you're required to have that. The general liability amounts typically are $1 million per occurrence and then $3 million for aggregate. So that's typically listed on the insurance certificate. And then we always want to make sure that Department of Workforce Services, that DWS is listed as well. Typically we have you include us with our address so that that's indicated on the insurance certificate so that they know that we are the additionally insured since you will be receiving funding from us for the grant. And then I don't know if there's a second one for this one. Yeah. So there's some additional information as far as the required insurance for if a grantee employs like doctors, dentists, social workers, mental health therapists, or other professionals. They do need to maintain a policy of the professional liability insurance with no less than 1 million and still the 3,000 aggregate. And that's just for, it's basically like a malpractice insurance coverage. And then if there's any other insurance policies that are required based on the agreement, that will be included in your contract. That will be made known to you. And so we just want to make sure that you're meeting that as well. And then as far as the billing and payments, and I think finance may have talked about this a little bit. We might go into a little bit more detail about it. But as far as receipt for like the itemized billing for reimbursement, just make sure that you are completing and submitting those in a timely manner. Again, because there is a start and end date to this grant, we want to make sure that you are providing those reimbursement requests, the invoices, in a timely manner. And typically there will be some like kind of specific outlined timeframes, again, in your contract once that is received. One of the biggest ones that we always want to make sure of is because we go on a fiscal year, a state fiscal year. So typically we start funding July 1st and ends June 30th. And so anything that's going to be submitted for reimbursement by June, for example, we want to make sure we're getting that in a timely manner. So it does say just making sure that you're billing for those services no later than July 15th, just because we are doing closeout at that time. And we want to make sure that we are able to get your reimbursement done and completed in a timely manner. So that is it for billing and payments. And then as far as, I'm trying to think if there were any other ones. Oh yeah, payment withholding. So again, this could kind of go back to monitoring. So if there's something that's missing, or if, you know, maybe Emma reaches out to you and she's like, hey, we're missing this part of your bill, we need this. And it isn't provided, it could mean you're not getting your reimbursement. There are also other things around the monitoring, like if things aren't being met, there's requirements that aren't being met, that also could mean payment withholding until those specific monitoring requirements are happening. So just keep in mind that there may be times where a payment is delayed, just in individual circumstances. So, okay, and then if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, that was it. Okay. I couldn't remember how many there were.
There were a lot. It's hard to keep
Yes,
track, I'm
I
sure.
know.
All right, so we have about 8 minutes left for questions if you have any. Of course, we have been answering as we go. And if there are questions that you think of later or that we don't get to today, just know that you can submit any questions to that email, theschoolreadiness@utah.gov, or through the Google form, and they will be uploaded to our Q&A that we've been talking about a lot. So we will just open for any questions that you have.
I have a question about the budget. Could you explain again how to fill it out if we were on the grant prior? Just like the tabs, how we can fill that out and yeah, get it accurate.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. If you wanted to present that screen. Thank you so much, Kimber. Okay, so you would have 3 sites, Stephanie, right? So you're applying for, you're doing 1 application and you'd be applying for 3 sites. So you would complete site 1, 2, and 3. And that would be a breakdown of each site, and that all those 3 sites must total up to year 1. So if you go to that second tab that says year 1, Kimber, can you click on the, oh yeah, thanks, she's working on it. Okay, so the sites 1, 2, and 3 would need to equal the total amount in year 1. And then you don't need to deal with the first tab because everything is calculating in that first tab. Year 2 and 3, you're just going to complete those. And that's just going to be an overall total of your sites 1, 2, and 3. So, if you go back to site 1, please, sorry to that, yeah. So in site 1, I can't remember if you completed, you have the application, so you can see kind of what was applied for last year, but you might want to take a look at whether you did, I don't think you did a NICRA, may have done it. Did you do category 2? No, yeah. So you did category 2. So if you scroll down to category 2, so you wouldn't need to worry about category 1. You'd scroll down to category 2 and give us your total, a breakdown of your admin costs. So I think Kimber's working on scrolling down to category 2. And then
So I wouldn't need to fill out like our budget information from this past year, just like going forward.
Just going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need to do, you could complete year 2 and year 3 because you've already done year 1. You don't need to fill out year 1. I think that that's something obviously that you could fill it out. I mean, I think that what you need to do is explicitly on that budget piece is say you've had year 1, so you did not complete year 1, and that would help the scorers to know, because remember that we're not scoring, so everybody has to remember to think about the fact that even though you've been on the grant for a year and we have a history with you, the scorers don't know that. So remember that the scorers do not know, and everything's getting redacted, like your names are getting redacted. So we could potentially in the scorers meeting, we will be moderating the scorers meeting, so we could connect those numbers up and say, yes, this program is a current grantee, and we could rectify that. But just so that there isn't any, misunderstanding, it's important in a few budget areas to state that you are a current grantee and you're only submitting documents for year 2 and year 3 because you've already been on the grant for year 1. Okay.
So say 1, 2, 3, and then just year 2 and 3.
Yes, and
Okay.
then year 2 and year 3 will calculate. They will populate here. Your year 1 will just be blank. So just remember in the narrative that you can state, that we've had year 1, and that's why year 1 is blank. So yeah.
Thank you. That helps.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions in the chat, Emma. The 25% of eligible students, the at-risk population. If so, for the 25% at-risk students, where do I find the explanation of where at-risk is? And Chelsea provided a link.
Thank you, Chelsea.
And that's just to the code. I know we have a document, but I don't know where it is at this very moment. So I'd have to look it up. I don't know if it's on DWS's page or if that's something we would give after grants were accepted.
Do you mean for the eligibility form?
Yes.
I think that we did we provide an example, Kimber, in the RFGA packet for the eligibility form? Yeah, because we update
I
that.
think we just provide the form itself. Just the form.
So the
itself.
form is in the grant packet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you can find that in on the DWS webpage. I thought that we did. So you'll find a link that will say eligibility form, and that will pull up an old version of the eligibility form. Just know that that's not the form that you're going to be using moving into the grant. If you're accepted onto the grant, we do have an updated version because with legislature this year, as we mentioned in the earlier slides, there's a link to the 2022 legislative session that there was an eligibility criteria and teacher credential change in that bill. And so the new eligibility form will have will mention that being in foster care will include you and will consider that child to be eligible. So that isn't on this form because that was released before the legislative change occurred. And so just use that in terms of knowing kind of as a guideline of what we ask for eligibility and the definition. And then, oh great, so you found it, wonderful. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah.
Right.
Did Joe, did you have something to add, or did you want to answer this question? You're unmuted, so I just wanted to make sure there was nothing you wanted to add.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, you're okay. With reporting grants, if parents use a subsidy to pay tuition, should we report that though it fluctuates? Also, should we report who pays tuition using DWS payments?
Joe, do you have an answer for this one, or will we need to kind of come back with an answer for this?
Could you say that again, Kimber?
So the question just is, with reporting grants, if parents use a subsidy to pay tuition, should we report that, though it fluctuates? Should we report who pays tuition using DWS payments?
Let's come back to that. I'd like to talk to Emma about that before we give you an answer on that.
Okay. I think that we need to look into that, Kimber, because my understanding is that eligible students shouldn't be paying tuition, but we should talk. We will get back. We will answer that question in the Q&A. And I know that we've talked about this in the past, but I want to make sure that we're giving everybody the correct answer and just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Any more questions?
All right, well, it sounds like we are good. We are past our time by 2 minutes, so we are going to let everyone go. Thank you for joining us. And if you do have questions, remember to just email theschoolreadiness@utah.gov or use that Google form. And we appreciate you all being here and participating.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, we look forward to reading through your applications. Well, we'll read it on our ends, but we won't be scoring, but we're looking forward to seeing them come in, and send them early. Thanks, Luz.
We want to stop the recording, Emma.
Yeah.